Hello and welcome to Monday Morning, where we watch the Sunday morning news shows so that you do not have to. I'm Katie Halper.
I'm Aaron Maté. Thanks so much for being here. What a wonderful way to start the week. Us, you guys, and some of the worst people on corporate news. Our website, as always, is usefulidiots.podcast.com. Go there to support the show and get bonus content.
Yeah, and I just want to echo what the great Teddy G says, which is Katie and Aaron taking one for the team every Monday morning. It's true. We even take one for the team starting Sunday when we watch them. And the way that you can recognize our hard work and labor and emotional labor is by giving us a like for free. Just a thumbs up.
All right. Well, let's get to our weekly recap from Meet the Depressed.
Good Sunday morning. As we come on the air, thousands are gathering in Arizona to pay tribute to conservative activist Charlie Kirk just over a week after he was assassinated. President Trump is among those set to speak at the memorial service. It comes as the country is grappling not only with political violence, but also threats to free speech. ABC indefinitely suspended late-night comedian Jimmy Kimmel for comments he made in the wake of Kirk's death. President Trump.
By the way, I don't know if people saw that, but that was actually a moment of Jimmy Kimmel being, I would say, kind of atypically funny. He actually made sense, I think. People are upset about it. It's pathetically tame, what he said. It was very funny. He played a clip of Trump. I don't know if people saw this one, but basically he's asked about Charlie Kirk's death, and he says it's terrible for like a millisecond, and then goes on to talk about the construction of something that he's building. So that was it.
Yeah, well, that was classic Trump. Like, everyone's supposed to be in mourning, and he's concerned about how the new White House ballroom or whatever he's building is going. That's a good window into his psyche. But Jimmy Kimmel, look, he did say something that was factually wrong. He said that like the alleged shooter
comes
from Trump's MAGA movement, and that wasn't true. So the thing there to do would be to offer a correction. Not to have the head of the FCC come out and say that ABC needs to take Jimmy Kimmel off of the air, which is what happened, which is a total crackdown on free speech. I mean, you know, there are many reasons, I think, to take Jimmy Kimmel off the air. I would argue it's not that funny, and his ratings weren't very good. So, I mean, that's an argument for it, but not because the head of Trump's FCC decrees it. That's what happens in authoritarian societies, and we're not supposed to have that here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I do think that what Trump was probably more angry about, honestly, was the dig at him. He said Trump is at the fourth stage of grief, which is construction.
That's funny.
That was funny.
Yeah, that's funny.
And apparently he has said in the past, free Palestine.
I strongly doubt that.
No. Well, it was, I think it was someone like urging him to say it. Maybe it wasn't that. Anyway, I'll follow. We can put a pin in that for later on.
Yeah, I'd love to believe that was true, but
on basically on not being able to say things about Palestine. But yeah, we'll get into that.
Okay, stay tuned. Are we going to find out on the show if Jimmy Kimmel really called for free Palestine? That'd be,
let us know, guys.
I'd love to be wrong. All right.
Warning: the FCC could now target broadcasters which critique him. On Friday, I sat down with Pennsylvania's Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro, who is a victim of political violence himself. Earlier this year, an arsonist firebombed the governor's mansion in Harrisburg while he and his family were sleeping. I asked the governor what he makes of this.
And you know what Josh Shapiro supports? He supports firebombing the people of Gaza while they're sleeping and destroying their homes. And just as it's not justified to firebomb his home, I think it's also not justified to justify the homes of tens of thousands of more Palestinians in Gaza. So I don't know. I wish he could reflect on that, Mr. Anti-Political Violence.
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect that to happen anytime soon, but it surely would be great for him, for his own personal well-being. But, you know, it's interesting. It's like, it's not that complicated, I think, what we're saying, which is that there's hypocrisy and these people don't deserve to be killed, like Charlie Kirk and Josh Shapiro, or firebombed. But I'll be honest, I'm a lot more upset about what's happening to people in Gaza.
Okay, is that it for the recap?
I think so. I guess I just wanted to add one piece of info, which is that Trump, if people saw the great interview we did with the great Chris Hedges, he talked about his martyrdom, and totally predictably, you have Trump saying he's a martyr now for American freedom. That's what he said at the memorial. And Stephen Miller gave a very scary speech, and he said, "We will prevail over the forces of wickedness and evil." Because for Stephen Miller, of course, forces of wickedness and evil are like undocumented people working hard in this country.
Well, when Stephen Miller says we need to prevail over the forces of wickedness and evil, they should start playing like the opening keyboards to Man in the Mirror, like dun, dun,
oh
dun,
yeah,
I'm
good
gonna
idea.
make a change.
Yes.
Well, what I mean, that should be the background of Stephen Miller talking about taking on evil.
Exactly.
Man in the mirror, Man in the Mirror, buddy, Man in the Mirror.
Yeah, and for those of you too young, that's a great Michael Jackson song. And Wilson, make sure you write that down for a compilation album.
That's gonna be a crazy compilation album one day when you drops it on you. Yeah, we got a lot of hits in the camp. Okay, let's turn to Emmanuel Macron, the president of France. Now, at the UN this week, there's a gathering going on to basically symbolically recognize Palestinian statehood. Some countries have already announced it. Canada, I'm saying Canada first for obvious reasons. It's the most important country.
Aaron's a Canada firster.
Canada, the UK, Portugal, Australia, they've all offered this like symbolic recognition of a Palestinian state.
Yeah.
I have some thoughts on this. On the one hand, like, I'm sorry if this annoys people. I don't want to totally dismiss it, because I do think recognizing the Palestinian right to self-determination, even if it's completely symbolic and toothless, I do think there's something positive there. At the same time, it's also completely useless.
Right.
And it's also way too late. And of course, it's being done by these people. And I want to be very clear, people understand this is what I'm saying. Like, it's being done to avoid doing what they really should be doing, which is stopping the genocide.
Exactly, right.
But the idea, in theory, of recognizing at least some, like, for once, finally, the Palestinians deserve, at minimum, they deserve a whole lot more. They deserve their whole homeland back. But at minimum, that they deserve a state of their own is, I think, not something to totally dismiss.
Well, I also think what's useful about it, and again, I agree with you in terms of their motives. They're not actually doing this because they believe in Palestinian self-determination. They're doing this so that they can look like they're doing something in the face of genocide without actually stopping genocide. But what's useful about it is that it exposes the absolute opposition of Netanyahu and basically all Israeli politicians, or the ones who are in power right now. It exposes how opposed they are to even two states. And that's useful because a lot of people pretend that that's what Israel wants, and that Hamas is making this impossible, etc. But the rhetoric on this makes it very clear. And we've known this for forever, that they don't want a two-state solution either. And just to remind people, Netanyahu is now saying that this, of course, is recognizing, rewarding terrorism, quote unquote. You're giving a massive reward to terror if you give them a state. As opposed to October 7th,
as opposed to before October 7th, when he also was opposed to Palestinian state.
Exactly, right.
I mean, basically, like, you can't win with this guy. If Palestinians try to go to the International Criminal Court, or they try to even get symbolic recognition at the UN, and this was long before October 7th.
Right.
There were sanctions on them. If Palestinians march nonviolently in Gaza, they get gunned down by Israeli soldiers. If even Hamas says we accept a Palestinian state in just 22% of our historic homeland, which is what many Hamas leaders did, Israel ignores them. And actually, Netanyahu even said that we'll never even discuss the possibility. So this excuse that Netanyahu is now using, this is rewarding terror. He's the terrorist that's been rewarded his entire political career.
Exactly.
He's just protecting. Okay, so let's turn to Emmanuel Macron. He's among the people pushing this idea for a Palestinian state. Let's hear from him.
The recognition process and the peace plan which goes with this.
And by the way, he's actually speaking in English. Okay. It may not sound like it at first.
Recognition process is a precondition. So my first point is to say, I don't answer the Hamas with that. I don't meet the expectations of Hamas. Hamas is just obsessed by destroying Israel. But I recognize the legitimacy of...
I'm sorry, dog. Actually, Hamas was more accommodating on the two-state solution than you are. because you're now recognizing a Palestinian state. Now, Hamas, as I've said before, years ago, said we would accept a Palestinian state in just 22% of our historic homeland. Like, you can go back, and there's many Hamas leaders that have said that. They changed their charter in 2017. If you read it carefully, if you actually read it, it's obvious what they're saying there. Now, what they never said is we're going to recognize Israel. But if you're a Palestinian whose land was stolen from you in what is now Israel, why would you recognize Israel? Especially if Israel's always refusing to recognize you and grant you your basic rights. So Hamas actually went a lot further than Macron or anybody else in the West did by saying, we'll accept a Palestinian state into 22% of our historic homeland, which means all of Gaza, all the West Bank, which means no Israeli settlements, which people like Macron claim are illegal but have done nothing to substantively oppose, and will accept and just control of parts of East Jerusalem, which is the center of Palestinian life. So when he talks about Hamas and blah blah blah, no, actually there have been more accommodating than you have, and you're way too late to the game.
Every accusation is a confession.
Exactly.
So many Palestinian people who want a state, who are a people, they want a nation, they want a state, and we should not push them toward Hamas. If we don't offer them a political perspective and such a recognition, the unique answer will be security, and they will be completely trapped by Hamas as the unique option. My second point is, thanks to this recognition and thanks to the diplomatic move we launched, we started to isolate Hamas. Because we, at the New York Declaration, which was voted, as you know, by 142 countries, we gathered all the Arab League states, all the leaders of the regions, to work closely with us to precisely dismantle and disarm Hamas. Till now, they were not engaged in such a move. Now, we gather.
Have you given any thought to gathering the same group and disarming the country that's carrying out a genocide? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Have we considered that?
Here.
Yeah, just the country that's like destroying an entire society. Can we maybe consider that thought for a second? Like, you know, but no, of course not, because, you know, violence that resists aggression and occupation, that has to be dismantled. The violence of the occupation and aggression, that's fine. That's totally fine. In fact, we have to send them more weapons, as Trump is now doing, by the way. Trump just announced $6 billion in new weaponry for Israel.
Sounds like he's rewarding terrorism.
Exactly right. That's exactly
what Trump did.
Exactly.
All these states, all these people to work closely with us in this move. So I think this is why we can create the condition of a concrete action. First, to give this right to the Palestinian people. Second, to isolate Hamas from the rest of the Palestinians and the whole region, and precisely build security. But let me tell you something which is for me very important in this context. Israel had wonderful security results against Hezbollah, Hamas, top leaders, and managed to neutralize a lot of top decision makers of terrorist groups. They did it. This is their merit. But in terms of fighting against Hamas, this is a failure today.
What is a failure?
Because they killed all the key leaders. This is a success.
All right. So what he's basically going to argue here is that, like,
it's
listen,
really
it's so wonderful what Israel did in Lebanon. They had it was majestic. They killed the leader of Hezbollah, who we call a terror group, and really they're just a group that resists Israeli aggression. That's what they're founded to do. It's great. It's wonderful. Like Lebanon killing kids, maiming them with pagers, wonderful.
Blinding them, all good.
Iran bombing Iran, wonderful. Regime change in Syria, fantastic. But Gaza,
political assassinations, right? That's something else that we're supposed to just celebrate, like killing Sinwar and Hania before him.
Sure, like wonderful.
Extrajudicial assassination. That's great. Yeah.
But in Gaza, okay, like the problem is not that they've destroyed an entire society, killed tens of thousands of people, maybe hundreds of thousands, who knows, because it's hard and impossible to get an accurate toll. The problem is there are still now more Hamas fighters because Israel destroyed their society. So when you do that, people are going to be motivated to fight you back.
Right, exactly.
So he's saying, in that respect, it's a failure. Not like this is a genocide, a moral disaster, blah, blah, blah. No, this is like strategically not a win.
Yeah. And again, it's like of course it should not be killing civilians, but you also need to oppose assassinating political leaders. I mean, and that's just never part of the discussion at all. It's just insane that he just openly says, oh, it's good that they're killing these political leaders. Like, would he celebrate that if people did that to Netanyahu and cited that because attributed that to Netanyahu's terrorism? Something tells me he doesn't think that people have the right to do that.
All right, let's go to the next clip of Emmanuel Macron.
Authority, which has some governance over the West Bank, already was working with Israeli security forces. But Hamas came to...
So did this start? She says the Palestinian Authority, right? Which already has some governance over the West Bank. Okay.
Power through the ballot box.
Hold on, I just want people to hear this in all its glory.
And it's precisely, we have a series of reform, which are part of the process.
But that's it, right? You're talking about recognizing the Palestinian Authority, which has some governance over the West Bank, already was working with Israeli security forces. But Hamas came to power through the ballot box.
Look, it's,
in the first place.
If we are honest, it's totally different. And this is why I think...
All right, I always love that argument. How dare people vote for Hamas? Because Hamas was voted in 2 decades ago now. Everyone there, I mean, she's not saying this, but a lot of people say because of the Hamas elections, because they came to power through elections, not through a coup, people should be held responsible for all of Hamas's actions. So it's pretty dangerous to bring up that talking point, the talking point of they voted for them, because we know that is often used to justify genocide, basically.
Yeah, it's a logic of terror. Like,
right,
an entire civilian population is on the hook for the actions of the people that rule them, even though, of course, the people that they've been put under. I mean, there's such a long history. The people of Gaza voted against the Palestinian Authority because they were so inept and corrupt. Right. Hamas won. The U.S. and Israel responded by plotting a coup to basically undermine the results of the election. Hamas subverted that. And Israel and the U.S. responded by putting Gaza under an even more crippling and cruel siege and not allowing elections. In fact, Hillary Clinton later said, we should not have allowed the Palestinians to vote unless we're prepared to basically control the outcome.
Right.
So that's how committed we are to democracy for the Palestinians.
Exactly, yeah.
Like, only if we can select who they vote for.
Yeah. Also, has Brennan ever brought up to Israeli officials, but you guys voted in Netanyahu?
No, because exactly right. Like, we have such contempt for Palestinians that they're not even allowed to. They're not only not allowed to elect their own leaders. For example, we interviewed recently Arab Barghouti, the son of Marwan Barghouti, who's considered by many to be Palestine's Mandela. He's been in prison for more than 2 decades, precisely because Israel recognizes he could unify the Palestinian people and be an effective leader. So not only that, but also we get to punish your entire society if you vote the wrong way.
Right. So gross.
Let's accept the fact that a lot of people worked very hard to kill the credibility of the Palestinian Authority in Gaza years ago. Mm-hmm. And Hamas appeared as precisely a sort of alternative option. Mm-hmm. But the terrorist attacks were launched by Hamas, not by Palestinian Authority. And if we say all those living in Gaza and all those backing a Palestinian state are de facto the support of Hamas, there is no end to this war, except the day you kill everybody. And this is terrible. So we have to recognize that the Palestinian Authority has to be reformed. The governance is not satisfactory today. We need a new...
Leader is nearly 90
we need a new Palestinian Authority. But let's just remark, and please notice with me, that thanks to the recognition process we launched, for the first time for many years, we got the 9th of June a series of clear commitments from the Palestinian Authority.
This whole thing is so cynical. They created the Palestinian Authority to be a collaborator force for Israel, to basically use the veneer of the so-called peace process to expand Israeli control over the parts of the West Bank that it wanted, to further separate the West Bank from Gaza. And then finally, when it came time to give the Palestinians something, Israel was like, if you accept a Swiss cheese state where we keep all of our major settlements, then yeah, then we'll give you a Palestinian state, which of course no Palestinian could do. And then when all that fails, you blame the Palestinians for it and say they need reform, they need to change, and it's all Hamas's fault. When it was the West and Israel that used the peace process to expand the occupation.
Right.
The whole thing is just it's all reversed, like in terms of like the blame. It's not the Palestinians who need to reform, it's the West needs to, for the first time, recognize the principle the Palestinians have the right to self-determination. And certainly the first people I think who would love to have a new Palestinian authority are the people of Palestine, because the PA has been so corrupt and inept, and they played along with this stupid game. But
right,
that should come from them.
Israel's like collaborators and enablers, yeah,
as they were set up to do. But that should come from them, not from Emmanuel Macron.
Right. And also just a reminder, people love referring to Hamas as this terrorist organization. They are a political party, and the ratio of their war crimes to non-war crime activity is so much lower than Israel's. So if you want to declare them a terrorist organization, then they do not hold a candle to the terrorism of Israel. Okay, should we finish that up?
Sure.
And by the way, I just want to explain to people that he puts an H where there is not at the beginning and takes away the H at the beginning where there is.
A new vice president being elected, reform of the education program, a pay-for-slay, obviously, program as well, with the monitoring by a U.S. audit structure. So,
and they denounced the attack. They denounced October 7th.
And for the very first time,
20 months later.
This is true.
Forget this Macron clip. On behalf of French speakers, I want myself. I want to apologize for Katie mocking us French speakers. You know what I mean, Katie? I mean, you're making fun of his French accent as if it's funny, but as someone from a proud French-speaking nation of Canada, you know what I mean? Like this is how we speak the language, and French is a proud culture. And even though I'm not French, I do speak it. So
Aaron,
I feel like I need to defend my French-speaking brother.
You just said I'm not French. You didn't say I'm not French. You show what is possible for French speakers. I mean, I can't help it because the French are such assholes about people speaking French. Now, for all I know, Macron is very tolerant of that, but I'm not sure.
It's true. Honestly, when I was last in France, I tried to speak French and I was dismissed with such contempt. Such typically French contempt.
Wow.
So,
and you speak a French, right? As opposed to Canadian French?
I do try to speak a French.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or as they call it in Canada, they say it's like an international French.
Yeah. I mean, if you really analyze it psychologically, I've really sort of internalized the colonial mindset. I've rejected my own cultural French, which is French-Canadian French, because I'm from Canada. And I've tried to accept the master's French, like the colonial master's French. So really, there's some work I have to do there to decolonize myself.
And you know what? Honestly, Aaron, I'm really glad that you said that, because this is just one example of what Useful Idiots gives you, which is on the spot, unplanned psychological reflection and personal decolonization.
100%.
Yeah.
So any other French speakers out there who are who are maybe speaking the master's French versus the French-Canadian French or another kind of French, I mean, you're welcome for blowing your mind and setting you on a new path. Okay, let's turn to domestic matters. Chuck Schumer, the Senate minority leader of the Democrats. Hey, how's he doing on endorsing the Democratic candidate in the country's largest city? How's he doing on that? Well, Chuck Schumer is not yet prepared to endorse Zoran Mamdani.
Don't say, Aaron. Don't give it away.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, speaking of candidates, you've been asked numerous times if you will endorse Zoran Mamdani for New York City mayor. You always say you're going to continue to talk. There are two key questions here that you haven't answered. One is, will you ever endorse him? And two, what do you need from him to get your endorsement?
Okay. Well, first of all, I know him. We've had a good relationship in the past, and we had a good meeting 2 weeks ago, a very long meeting with a lot of serious questions. And all I can tell you is I'm going to continue talking to him.
What's the holdup?
I got to continue talking to him, and that's what I'm going to do.
I would love to be a fly in the wall of those talking meetings. Yeah.
Is part of the calculus that if You endorse a Democratic socialist. You're worried it will be damaging to your party, maybe even your chances of winning back the Senate?
No, I don't think that's it. I mean, that's part of it, but I think the main thing is Chuck Schumer, like the person interviewing him, is an Israel firster.
Exactly.
And Zohran Mamdani has this affliction where he sees Palestinians as equal human beings and doesn't like kiss the ring of Jewish supremacy as Chuck Schumer and Dana Bash do. And Chuck Schumer knows that his position of Israel first is no longer acceptable within his own party. So he doesn't want to admit that he's not endorsing Zohran Mamdani because he's an Israel firster, along with all the other things that Zohran Mamdani represents, which is like tackling affordability, representing working people. Chuck Schumer also doesn't represent that. So Chuck Schumer can't articulate why he's not endorsing Zohran Mamdani. He just has to say, we're still talking. We have to keep talking. We're talking.
Which is really funny because on last week's Thursday Throwdown, which you can get as a subscriber to usefulidiotspodcast.com, you had someone on Fox News who said that, well, Chuck Schumer's basically endorsed Mamdani already because he didn't call him a freak who says anti-Semitic things. But I also want to point out that, you know, if it's pretty rich that Dana Bash is pushing that it's detrimental to endorse for someone to endorse a Democratic socialist, right? So she's kind of giving Schumer an out by letting him pretend that that's why he wouldn't be endorsing him. And I do think it's very worth bringing up the fact that AOC is already considering running for Senate. Okay, Mamdani had a 17-point lead on Cuomo in the Democratic mayoral candidate election with the Jewish vote. And the DSA found 74% of prospective Democratic voters said Democratic socialist policies are closest to theirs. And 66% of Democrats said they prefer socialism to capitalism, according to Gallup data released earlier in September. And Mamdani's policies are overwhelmingly popular. So Dana Bash presenting this as a political liability is projection.
And this is why, by the way, because people like Chuck Schumer are so shook by Zohran Mamdani's candidacy to the point where he can't even endorse him this late in the game. This is why I think everyone's got to fall in line. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
behind Zohran, like whatever criticisms you might come up with, this is a wonderful moment that the Democratic Party establishment and all the other Israel firsters are really shook. And there's a real opportunity for a candidate talking about affordability and who also sees Palestinians as equal human beings. That's a wonderful moment that is very rare in this culture. And so I say, everyone on the left, fall in line. Fall in line.
Bend the knee. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's finish out this clip.
I'm going to continue talking to him. Dana, you can ask me again.
All right.
I believe in dialogue. Dialogue. That's why. I just like dialogue. I want to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Communication is very important. Yeah.
But it's great. See, normally in a different time, he'd be saying things like Zohran Mamdani's an anti-Semite, and I can't, he'd be coming out and being upfront about why he can't endorse them. But it's a new era now where you cannot get away with being a Democratic Party politician and kissing the ring of Israel.
Oh, yeah. And you know what else Mamdani has done, which is such a crime, I'm sure, to people like Chucky, is saying that Netanyahu should be arrested.
Exactly. Yes. Which is incredibly brave, by the way, in this political culture for a candidate for mayor of the country's largest city to say, I would arrest Netanyahu.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. No other prominent leader comes close to that. And that's something I think to appreciate. I'm sorry, I sounded kind of like a Zohran fan, but I just think it's really unprecedented what he's doing, and it's very admirable, and it's so encouraging to me that Chuck Schumer it feels so uncomfortable avoiding giving him an endorsement and explaining why.
Now, you know what? I think if Zohran, and I'm sure you're watching, Zohran, if you want the Useful Idiots endorsement or the Katie Halper Show endorsement, there's one thing that you need to do: come on the show. That doesn't guarantee it, but that creates the opening. Because we need to talk to you, much like Chuck Schumer needs to talk to you. But unlike Chuck Schumer, we'll be able to, I think, come to a conclusion.
Yeah. Sooner. Well, again, I'm sorry to be like a wet blanket, but interviewing politicians for me is kind of a. All
right. All right. You can come on. Okay. Wow. So go Aaron Maté just named Zohran. Yeah. Go on my show.
I only want to interview politicians if I can really challenge them, and I don't want to challenge.
I get it. Yeah. Right.
So, okay. Let's move on to.
You think your friend Chris Coons will come on?
Oh yeah, we can put that in. I'm sure he.
Yeah, let's put in a request. Yeah.
We can put that in. All right, let's turn to the issue of free speech.
Oh my gosh.
Trump. Remember when Trump was talking about free speech on the campaign trail, and
he ran on it.
He even signed some executive order after taking office, like restoring free speech. Well, how's that going? Well, this week, as we talked about earlier, Trump's FCC chair called for the removal of Jimmy Kimmel because Jimmy Kimmel made a comment disparaging the MAGA movement. That was false. He said that the alleged shooter in Utah who killed Charlie Kirk came from the MAGA movement. That's not true. But again, the answer to that is not to have the FCC chair call for a talk show host removal and then for that talk show host to be removed. But that's what happened. Right. So how is the party of free speech handling all this? Well, here is a Republican senator, a big Trump cheerleader, Markwayne Mullin.
Of the great state of Oklahoma.
Yeah, and the guy who has two first names in his first name is Markwayne.
Sort of a different version of what we have seen this week from the president. He claimed that 97% of stories about him on newscasts are negative, and he said, I think that's really illegal. Here's a little bit more of what he said.
When somebody is given 97% of the stories are bad about a person, that's no longer free speech, that's no longer, that's just cheating.
Senator, he really seems to be redefining free speech as speech that is only favorable to him. I can't imagine that you're comfortable with that as somebody who swore an oath to the Constitution, and a pretty prominent part of the Constitution is the right to free speech.
He didn't say free speech, he said cheating, and what he was referring to is elections. When you have 98 or 97% of the news stories over that, he said, no, he just said it. I'm playing back exactly the message.
97% of stories about him on
newscasts he said was cheating. But he said it was cheating. I'm repeating the clip you just played because I didn't watch that. You just played it for me for the first time. Okay, then what would he be referring to when he said cheating?
He was referring to
because he didn't say free speech.
He believes
Of course he didn't say free speech. He's arguing against it. He's not going to say 97% of stories are negative and that is free speech and I'm going to shut it down. This guy's such a tool.
This reminds me, in school, in university, I studied communication studies. So we read like Marshall McLuhan and like sort of like studying rhetoric and the signifiers and the meaning of mass communication. I feel like Markwayne Mullin's offering his own kind of, it's like he's offering his own sort of analysis here. It's very academic. I'd love to see this, expanded upon in a paper, in like academic paper about what is the nature of these clips that we're hearing and why the news media is presenting to us falsely.
Yeah. And again, something you only hear at Useful Idiots.
Oh, I like this from Bisquick. The Mamdani is the message. That's right.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. That's right. Good callback. Good callback.
Good callback. Yeah.
All right.
It was a very long statement that he made. He was saying that he believes that the stories on network television about him are negative and that it should be potentially illegal. That is my question to you.
Okay. Well,
this is what bothers me about the Republicans is they're so bad and they're such suck-ups to Trump that they then give people like Dana Bash, who's such a terrible journalist, an opportunity to look like a really good journalist pushing back because it's just like it's such an easy home run,
Right.
It's like it's a layup. They just tee it up for them because like they're so slavishly devoted to Trump. It's a problem.
Yeah, exactly. They get to look adversarial.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not. I can't, Dana. I can't answer a question I didn't hear. I'm repeating what the clip you just played. What the clip you just played said that and it said that it is cheating. That's his words. That's not me.
Yeah, he says that bad coverage of him is cheating.
Me making the assumption. That's not paraphrasing what he said. That's the clip you played.
Did he say paraphrasing, which is kind of a great word? Let's see.
That's not paraphrasing what he said.
He did paraphrasing. It's a new term.
I like that.
It's how the Christian right does it.
That's the clip you played. And that 100%, because we've had this conversation, that 100% refers to elections. When you have 97% of the news stories on him that's constantly telling bad stories, and by the way, that wasn't even close what was happening when Biden in office. You guys were covering it up constantly, what he was doing. And so when 97% of the news stories are negative about him and 99% about Pete Hegseth is negative, It is
Yes, my
cheating
question
because
is,
you're putting out a narrative that isn't true.
I guess my question is, if you just kind of
So he just redefined cheating. Cheating is now putting out a narrative that isn't true. He's no longer claiming it's an election thing, I believe. I'm just trying to keep up with his very fast mind.
take a step back, sir, because let's say he was talking about, and you speak Trump speak, you talk to him all the time. Let's just say you're right that when he said cheating, he in his mind was referring to elections. But it is since the beginning of time in the United States of America, presidents have not liked the criticism that they got when they get coverage that they don't believe is favorable to them. But they have said that's just part of being the president in the United States of America with a free press. You don't think there's a slippery slope going on here with?
I mean, just to parse this a little bit, look, it's not as if previous presidents have been like, models of respect for free speech.
Sure.
The Obama administration launched an unprecedented number of prosecutions of leakers. They went after journalists like, what's his name, James Rosen. And also Obama, there was a really sycophantic media who like just treated
Sure.
him like a saint. Like everything he did was just, and same with Reagan too. So yes. And Trump was framed as a Russian asset. So not that they don't have grounds to complain about being treated unfairly, but yeah, the answer is not to shut down news outlets. It's just to respond with your own argument. That's the whole free speech thing. Oh yeah, and then of course the persecution of Julian Assange.
Yeah, exactly.
Which that happened under which Trump. I mean, the investigation began under Obama, but Trump in his first term and William Barr and Mike Pompeo, they ran with that. So yeah. It's not as if Trump himself now, because he's going after people like Jimmy Kimmel, as if he's just introducing this attack on free speech.
Sure, but he does have like other presidents have the grace and subtlety to be more nuanced about it, to not be as apparent about it. So Trump really, if Trump wants to get away with it more, he needs to tweak his style.
That.
Well, I would like to go back and look at the comparisons of how many negative stories were ran against Biden, against Obama, against Clinton, and even against Bush 41 and Bush 43. And I'm just saying, let's. He didn't say he was going to crack down. He said it was cheating. I'm just repeating the words, but I'm just saying there is a problem, and I agree with him. There is a problem. There isn't any positive negative stories that our left-leaning media outlets can tell about him. And look, has he been such a bad president? Absolutely, I believe in free speech.
I would say yes.
Yeah.
You know what they just did? So we've covered this extensively. Trump cut billions of dollars over a decade-long period from SNAP. Food assistance program, feeding low-income people. So they cut that billions of dollars. And then what they just did on Friday, you know what they did? They've ended the hunger survey. So now they're no longer going to keep track nationally of people going hungry. So cut food stamps, cut food assistance, and then cut the program that keeps track of the people that need food assistance. It's
a perfect 1-2 punch.
Yeah. So I'd argue, yes, Mark Wade Mullen, Trump has been a pretty bad president, and he deserves negative press. My critique of the media was that they were focusing on the wrong things, like this fantasy he was a Russian asset.
Right.
But that's another story.
Without a question, I believe in free speech. There's a thin line between free speech and when it crosses a line and causes violence. And when you start calling someone fascist, which is what we've seen prescribed on the bullets and on the magazines of these individuals, when you start using words of that he's a Nazi and comparing him to Hitler, and I'm not saying you've done that, I'm saying this is the negative stories that have been played about him. There is a problem at some point, and some people have to be held accountable. But free speech is free speech. Hateful speech is also free speech. But when it leads to violence, now that's a crossover, and people should be held accountable for that.
Okay, so now he's talking about the messages on the bullet casings of the person who allegedly shot Charlie Kirk. That's not what we're talking about. And also, as we played either last week or the week before, we have a bunch. There's a whole mashup of Trump calling people fascists.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and many other names too. And I agree that Trump shouldn't be compared to Hitler. That distinction belongs to Netanyahu, I think.
Right. Yeah.
But
gotta give Netanyahu credit. It's not fair to Netanyahu to toss that around so lightly. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, the question of speech is supposed to be you can even have hate speech. The question is, are you inciting violence? If you're inciting violence, that's not protected. But to prove that, you have to reach a certain level of evidence. And a negative news story about Donald Trump is not an incitement of violence. Sorry.
Yeah. And also just want to clarify that the fascist reference on the bullet casings was not actually a political thing. It was a reference to the Helldivers 2 game. Just like the Bella Ciao thing, thank God, because I love that song, was a reference to a gaming thing.
All right. Do you want to hear from Pennsylvania Governor?
Oh, yeah, we got to hear that. We got
Josh Shapiro for the Democratic take on this.
Yeah.
Is not violence or taking someone's life. It's more speech. It's more debate.
And speech has been in the spotlight this week after the news that ABC pulled Jimmy Kimmel, comedian, off the air after comments that he made on his late night show. What was your reaction to learning that he'd been pulled off the air?
Fear, just worry for our country. Our foundational principle in this country, which has roots in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, when William Penn settled here in the 1680s, is about freedom of expression, freedom of speech. And to see that being undermined by the long arm of the federal government is extremely dangerous. Again, whether you agree with Jimmy Kimmel or not, whether you found him funny or not, to fire someone because he told a joke about the president repeatedly and the president didn't like it, to fire him because he was inartful in his words in the wake of the killing of Charlie Kirk, when you have others in the media, and I mean this is no disrespect, who are inartful every day, right? That is dangerous when we are selectively firing people because of their viewpoints. And in addition to having Jimmy Kimmel no longer on the air, I think there's a deeper issue here I wanted to just take a moment on. I was on a Spanish language radio program.
All right, so he just talked there about, we can't fire people for having differing viewpoints. I mean, where has he been on the issue of firing people because they criticize Israel and call for a ceasefire? Including at, Penn, the president of Penn was forced to resign by Zionist billionaires because Penn was allowing people who oppose genocide to protest, basically. And so, where has he been on that front?
Well, where he's been on that front is that he's compared pro-Palestine students to the KKK, and he really has intervened. There's actually a whole article about how he intervened in the response to the allegations of anti-Semitism. So he ran this quiet influence campaign where he kind of injected his office in Penn State and used this archaic law with a close advisor who pushed them to punish students and faculty for their speech and expression. And he also decried the actions of the president of Penn, who had declared not all anti-genocide protests are anti-Semitic. He pushed to ban a student group over their protests and remarks. And a Shapiro aide sent the man Shapiro had on the board of trustees a document calling for 16 professors to be placed on teaching leave. So he's a total hypocrite.
So I would say when it comes to free speech, Josh Shapiro is Josh Dish-Shapiro. He's Dish-Shapiroing. What do you think?
Dish-Shapiroing? What does that mean? Sorry.
Disappear. I'm just trying to do a pun.
Oh, I see. Okay. He disappears when it comes to defending free speech.
Josh Dish-Shapiro. It rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to Congressmember Jasmine Crockett. She was among the members of Congress who did not vote for a House measure recently honoring Charlie Kirk. And she explained why to CNN.
I do want to turn to something that you heard the senator just say, which is he was talking about a resolution that came before the House this past week honoring Charlie Kirk. And there were 58 Democrats who voted against it. You were one.
Yeah.
Why?
Absolutely. You know what? One of the things I do want to point out that's not been laid out that honestly hurts my heart is when I saw the no votes, there were only 2 Caucasians. For the most part, the only people that voted no were people of color because the rhetoric that Charlie Kirk continuously put out there was rhetoric that specifically targeted people of color. And so it is unfortunate that even our colleagues could not see how harmful his rhetoric was specifically to us. And I can tell you that a month prior to him passing away, he had actually gotten out on his podcast. I wasn't aware of this at the time, but he got out there and he was talking negatively about me directly. So if there was any way that I was going to honor somebody who decided that they were just going to negatively talk about me and proclaim that I was somehow involved in the great white replacement, yeah, I'm not honoring that kind of stuff, especially as a civil rights attorney and understanding how I got to Congress, knowing that there were people that died, people that were willing to die, that worked to make sure that voices like mine could exist in this place. So to me, just like we wanted to make sure that those Confederate relics were taken down, the idea of a new age relic being propped up was something that I just could not subscribe to. And it is unfortunate that more of my colleagues, even on my side of the aisle, could not see the amount of harm that this man was attempting to inflict upon our communities.
I think it's totally fair. It's one thing to condemn his murder, right? To oppose political violence. If that were the resolution, sure. But to honor his legacy and treat him as if it's some sort of heroic figure when he did disparage people of color in a really crude way. I mean, we played some of the clips. So what are you supposed to do? Just pretend that didn't happen because he was assassinated? So that's and she points out only 2 white people voted along with her in Congress to not honor his legacy.
I do think. Sorry,
No.
Well, I do think, though, I got to say, I think it's a little stupid for her to present it as he went after me, so I'm not going to honor him. I mean, it's fair, but I just think as a politician, you want to create like as much unity around something as possible. And I don't think voters are that's not going to resonate with voters necessarily. I do think also it should be his hateful rhetoric. We should be as inclusive as possible in highlighting his hateful rhetoric. So yes, it was anti-Black, but it was extremely anti-Palestinian, anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, also anti-trans. So yeah, I think it's just good to remind people of all the ways that he was intolerant. And I will say that, if he were anti-Jewish in the way he's anti-Black, anti-immigrant, anti-Palestinian, there would be no celebration of him. None.
All right. Well, let's move on to the UN General Assembly. It's happening in New York this week. World leaders are coming for meetings, including for this, as we've talked about, this symbolic gesture of recognizing Palestinian statehood. And someone else making a visit is the new president of Syria, Ahmed al-Shara, aka Mohammed al-Julani. And this is the first visit by a Syrian leader to the U.S. in 60 years. And this is seen as very historic. But I think what's even more historic about his visit is that this is the first visit. This is the first state visit by a former leader of al-Qaeda. That is right. Before he became the Syrian president and changed his name to Ahmed al-Shara, his name was Mohammed al-Julani, and he was the founding leader of al-Qaeda in Syria, to the point where just last December, there was a $10 million bounty on his head by the State Department. But after he led the successful regime change in Syria, which we were pushing for a very, very long time, all that was forgotten. And now, 24 years after al-Qaeda attacked the U.S. on 9/11, now a former al-Qaeda leader is visiting New York City. So that's how we're marking 9/11 this month, everybody. So Ahmed al-Shara sat down with Margaret Brennan of CBS News and listen to her introduction, because it's very illuminating.
If Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara had tried to come to New York, he would have risked being arrested. The U.S. had a $10 million bounty on him because of his past come to New York. He would have risked being arrested.
I didn't mean the U.S. By the way, I've always found it weird that he's had like a kind of extreme terrorist makeover, and this was like his intermediate phase in terms of dress. I always think it's weird. He kind of has the Fidel Castro look with the beard and the olive, and I don't like that. I think that's derivative, and I think he's tarnishing Fidel's legacy. But anyway.
Had a $10 million bounty on him because of his past connections to the Islamic State and al-Qaeda. Al-Shara turned
his past connections. Yeah, he was just the founding leader
Yeah, he
Al
dabbled.
Qaeda in Syria, and he was the deputy to the leader of ISIS. So, like just some past connections.
Look,
Yeah.
Aaron, didn't you experiment with things in college?
Well, I'm not a good test case because not really. I've always been, I've always been the same kind of person.
All right. Don't you know people who experimented in college?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Okay, there you go. So
sure.
I'm sure you were taught you didn't cut them off as people. Did you cancel them?
No, you're right. I didn't. Not to my knowledge.
There you
not
go.
To my knowledge. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
I'm not sure if they dabble in Al Qaeda, but yeah, it's a slippery slope.
Against those groups years ago. In December, he led the rebel forces that toppled Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad, who used bombs and chemical weapons against his own people.
Again, the chemical weapons thing, if you want a different take, listen to the OPCW whistleblowers who challenged the allegation and were censored. And I would argue that the chemical weapons narrative was an Iraq WMD level propaganda campaign to justify exactly what just happened, which is overthrowing Assad to bring in someone we prefer, in this case, the former leader of Al Qaeda in Syria.
Right.
And, in this interview, we're going to hear why we welcomed the former leader of Al Qaeda in Syria, because we're supposed to be at war with Al Qaeda, right? That was like the supposed basis for the war on terror. So why are we so happy about a former Al Qaeda leader in Syria? Well, he's actually going to give us a pretty good clue in the interview.
And Aaron, I'm sure that given that, she just pointed out the alleged crimes, war crimes of Bashar al-Assad, I'm sure she's going to go through the war crimes that al-Jilani committed, right?
Yes, and is still committing, which is being totally ignored. Like everybody who cheered on regime change in Syria, now that it's happened, everyone's like, okay, great, like game's over. When meanwhile, government forces under his rule have been massacring minorities, which is exactly why people oppose regime change, because the dominant faction in the Syrian insurgency was not moderate rebels, as Obama called them.
Right.
It was sectarian fanatics like members of Al Qaeda, and a lot of them weren't even Syrian. They came from around the world, and yet they were a threat to minorities, to Christians, to Alawites, to Druze, and those have been the main victims so far ever since Assad was overthrown. But
and of course, she's not going to go over his crimes.
Not here, no.
Last week, I went to Syria and spoke with al-Shara for 60 minutes. He accused the Assad regime of destroying entire communities and displacing 14 million people. He said foreign investment is desperately needed to rebuild. In June, President Trump temporarily waived some economic sanctions to help Syria recover. But Congress, the UN, and European nations would have to permanently lift more sanctions to draw long-term investment.
That's right. And they're not saying it, but that's a tacit acknowledgement that the sanctions that were imposed on Syria before regime change prevented reconstruction and kept people in destitution. And that was a major part of why regime change succeeded, because the country collapsed. On top of the U.S. also stealing Syria's oil and wheat with a military occupation. There's just so much. And then on top of that, yes, I went to Syria. I saw some of the towns that were bombed by the Russian forces on, acting with the Syrian government, and they were destroyed. But that took place in the context of the U.S. and their allies spending tens of billions of dollars to arm the Al-Qaeda dominated insurgency. So you had a brutal war, and in war, things get destroyed, and things were destroyed in Syria because the U.S. and their allies wanted regime change. And then so much so that they prevented the country from rebuilding by imposing crippling sanctions. So that's just some of the context that's always left out of coverage of this war.
Well, and I'm sure Brennan's going to travel to some Alawite villages, right, where massacres and mass detentions have been taking place.
Well, she certainly should.
And by the way, the takeaway here is if you want sanctions removed, just put in an Al Qaeda person.
Yeah, and by the way, compare the fact that Jilani, the former leader of Al Qaeda in Syria, who last year had a $10 million bounty on his head, he's welcomed in New York. Who isn't welcomed in New York? It's the Palestinian Authority, who are collaborators with the Israeli occupation. But because they're daring to take part in the symbolic gesture for Palestinian statehood, now the Trump administration is not welcoming them. So the corrupt sellout Palestinian Authority, they're not even welcome, but the former leader of Al Qaeda is. And why is that? Because the whole dirty war in Syria was aimed at taking out an adversary to Israel and to U.S. hegemony in the region, and to bleed their allies, namely Iran and Hezbollah, to draw them in, which is what happened, and to bleed them. That's what the goal was. And that's why after Assad was overthrown, Netanyahu openly took credit, and he's very happy.
Yeah, and another qualifying thing, if you want sanctions removed, is you have to oppose the axis of resistance, which he does.
And we're going to hear him say that.
And in foreign capitals, there are people who don't trust Ahmed al-Sharaa. In New York, he hopes to reintroduce Syria to the world and perhaps spend more time with President Trump.
Also, why does she show Netanyahu there?
Well, Netanyahu is so cynical that even though he helped put Jilani, aka al-Sharaa, in power, he's bombing Syria because he wants to keep Syria completely weak,
right?
And he wants to just exert his hegemony. So Israel armed the insurgency. Israel bombed Syria hundreds of times. Israel bombed oil tankers that were trying to break the blockade of Syria. But now Israel's so cynical. This is what they do. They just foment discord everywhere. They want to keep everyone fighting. So now he's turned around and bombed the same government that he helped put in power.
Yeah. All right. That checks out.
And he's trying to put pressure on al-Sharaa, aka Jilani, to basically cave to Israel and reach some new kind of quote unquote security deal that will give Israel even more of an open lane to go attack Iran.
But he's not vilifying him, right?
Well, they're certainly like Israel used the dirty war in Syria to its own end, and unfortunately people like Jilani played into that. And so now but Israel has no allies. They don't care about people. And they have no even though they helped put Jilani in power, now they're gonna mess with him too, because that's just what they do, which is why some people, me included, were arguing that it was a mistake and just it was going to be a disaster for people to cheerlead for a dirty war that was in Israel's interest. But anyway, let's hear from al-Sharaa.
Do you want to meet again with President Trump when you're standing on U.S. soil?
President Trump took a big step towards Syria by lifting the sanctions with a quick, courageous, and historic decision. He recognized that Syria should be safe, stable, and unified. This is in the greatest interest for all countries of the world, not just Syria. I believe the answer is yes. We need to discuss a great many issues and mutual interests between Syria and the USA. We must restore relations in a good and direct way.
Many of the officials that I spoke to about you describe you as a pragmatist. Other skeptics say that you change to meet what you need to be in that moment.
What's a good pun? So it's like pragmatic Al-Qaeda, like Qaeda. Yeah. Like the pragmatic Al-Qaeda leader. Okay. All right. Who's whose forces are slaughtering minorities as we speak. Anyway,
but he's pragmatic in that he's willing to change his style of clothing.
And that's important to understand who you are and the direction you're taking Syria in. Are you saying that you are just a completely changed man?
I don't entirely agree with the description of pragmatist, because in Arabic, it has some negative connotations. The point is, let's look at what's happening now, regardless of what was said in the media. Today, we have really saved the people from the oppression that was being thrust on them by the criminal regime. And we have restored hope for the people who are refugees or internally displaced.
Okay, by the way, there's been a lot of if you look at the refugee numbers, like some people have come back to the country, right? Because they're happy that Assad's gone. Others have left. And if you look at the numbers, they balance themselves out. There's a lot of people, for example, that I know have gone into Lebanon from Syria because they're fleeing, among other things, they're fleeing terror from state forces that have been slaughtering minorities. Back in March, there was the slaughter of hundreds, maybe thousands of Alawites on the coast. And in July, there was a slaughter of Druze in Soweto. And I actually just did an interview, 2 interviews about this that I'll be posting at the Gray Zone with members of these minority communities, Alawites and Druze. So it's like he's talking about restoring stability and hope. Like, okay, for some people, yeah, but not for the people who are fleeing terror from your forces and are suffering horrific massacres. And this is the problem with the whole premise of the dirty war propaganda was to pretend that Syrians are a monolith. So because there's a group of Syrians that wanted Assad gone, that's what represented the Syrian people. But no country is a monolith. And all we did was take one side to fuel a disastrous, dirty war that destroyed the whole country.
Right. Right. When people say listen to Syrians, they mean the Syrians with whom I agree.
Exactly.
Not the ones with whom I disagree. Yeah.
So they can return to their homeland. We supported the people who were bombed with chemical weapons. We also confronted ISIS. We expelled the Iranian militias and Hezbollah from the region.
By the way, ISIS leaders were living in Idlib, which was the territory he controlled. So under his, like before he took over from Assad, he was ruling over Idlib, this one province in Syria. And at least 2 ISIS leaders were living there in refuge, and they were killed by the U.S. Did he not know about that? I have a hard time believing that. And it would make sense because he's the former deputy leader of ISIS.
Right.
Okay? That's how he got his start. He was with ISIS when ISIS decided to have a Syrian franchise, and so he was sent to Syria to be the head of ISIS, and that's when they broke off and became Al-Qaeda in Syria. That's his past.
Yeah. Well, maybe Aaron, he knows how to take on ISIS because he has inside info because he was part of them.
All of these noble acts we took in Syria should have been the role of the international community. But the international community was unable to free a single prisoner.
Oh, wait a second. I just want to make sure we didn't miss something.
All of these noble acts we took in Syria, and we've restored hope for the people who are refugees or internally displaced, so they can return to their home. The point is, let's look at what's happening now, regardless of what was said in the media. Today, we have really saved the people from the oppression that was being thrust on them by the criminal regime. And we have restored hope for the people who are refugees or internally displaced, so they can return to their homeland. We supported the people who were bombed with chemical weapons. We also confronted ISIS. We expelled the Iranian militias and Hezbollah from the region.
Okay, there we go. That's what it is right there. That's what I was referring to when we were going to see why the U.S. was cool with an Al-Qaeda guy taking power. Because we expelled Hezbollah and Iran from the region. And who are Hezbollah and Iran? They're the main deterrents to Israeli aggression in the region. And that's what the dirty war was all about. So because the former leader of Al-Qaeda was willing to serve the goals of the U.S. in weakening Hezbollah and Iran, which again, whatever you think of them, they're the main deterrents to Israeli aggression. That's why it's cool to have the former leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria in power. And that's what the dirty war was all about. Okay. Well,
Oh, sorry, I was muted. But yes,
Yeah.
that is what it is all about. And it all comes down to where on that axis of resistance you fall.
All right. We're going to just do one more clip because we are coming to the end of the show. This is a bonus clip.
And by the way, sorry, I misspoke really quickly. I said Penn State instead of UPenn before. My apologies.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, the ghost of Joe Paterno would be very upset that his school was traduced. Okay. Let's go to Fareed Zakaria. Really hard for him to ask a challenging question. He's such a softball guy. And this one is no exception. He interviewed the former director of Mossad, Yossi Cohen, and keeping with the issue of confronting Iran in the region, and and that's what drives U.S.-Israeli policy. Here he is weighing in on the prospect of regime change in Iran. This is the former director of Mossad, Yossi Cohen, interviewed by CNN's Fareed Zakaria.
Is to make this kind of combination.
So given your perspective on Iran, and you must have agents working in Iran, you must have informers, otherwise you couldn't have gotten that information. As you know, there are 2 schools of thought essentially on Iran. One is that the regime is very fragile, that if you attack it, you will be able to destabilize it, topple it. The other one is these guys are tough guys. They came in through a revolution. Mm-hmm. They're hardline. They also provide a lot of patronage. Mm-hmm. They're pretty stable. Which view do you veer toward?
I mean, I see with a long time, I mean, with our experience, and we've tried to to be very effective in our tryings, I mean, to have a regime change. Truly, we believe that a regime change is so much needed, not only for the sake of the world, but for the sake of these Iranians that are countering from within.
Okay, so if you heard what he just said, we've been trying for regime change in Iran for a very, very long time. Now,
so honest, yeah.
what is the dominant narrative we get about Iran and Israel? It's always that Iran's trying to wipe Israel off the map, blah, 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 blah. But what they do is they parse a few statements from some Iranian leaders over the years, which basically say the Zionist regime shouldn't exist. And that's why, outlets like the New Yorker, which is liberal, will say, yes, that's why Iran poses a threat to Israel's security. Okay. So because some Iranian leaders say a few things sometimes about how this occupying government shouldn't exist, that Iran's an existential threat to Israel, it's trying to wipe it off the map. That's like the dominant narrative. The former head of Mossad just said, we've been trying to have regime change. So what's more of a threat? A country whose leaders occasionally say this government shouldn't exist, this occupying regime should come to an end, this Jewish supremacist regime should exist, or a former spy chief saying, we've been trying to overthrow the government for a very, very long time. But that's treated as normal, that we can just go around trying to overthrow governments. That's like, okay, yeah, sure. Why not? Because we've internalized this Israeli Western supremacy that allows us to go around and just overthrow whoever we don't like.
And also, Aaron, because as many Israel fans point out, we share values. We've shared values, the U.S. and Israel. And certainly when it comes to regime changing, we do. Yes.
So what a refreshing admission there from the former director of Mossad. Of course, Fareed Zakaria is not going to point out like, hey, do we have the right to regime change people? Is that wise? That's just taken for granted that we can do that. And that's why I would argue we're in such a perilous state in the world. And on that front, Iran, I don't think that story is over. I think it's quite plausible to expect more Israeli attacks coming soon.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, we're going to end the show.
Well, actually, before we end the show, I do want to, as promised, here's that Jimmy Kimmel clip, which, he does technically say free Palestine, but it'll be up to everyone here to judge how meaningful it is.
Free Palestine? Oh, free Palestine. Oh, what? Free Palestine? Yeah.
All right. So he technically says free Palestine, but there's not a lot of, I don't think anyone thought that was a very powerful cheer.
Free Palestine what? Yeah, I don't think that qualifies as.
But then he does say free Palestine after.
If you add an indignant what, I don't think that counts as saying.
I don't know, indignant, but surprised. Sure. It kind of undermines the seriousness of it. Yeah.
He sounded taken aback
at
the notion of saying free Palestine. I'm not going to count Jimmy Kimmel as a comrade in the struggle.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. All right. Katie, anything you want to plug for the Katie Halper Show this week?
Yeah, having a great show tomorrow with Sim Kern, who wrote a really cool book called Genocide Bad, and the inimitable Brianna Joy Gray, who's going to talk about Charlie Kirk because she has some thoughts on Charlie Kirk.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's our show. UseFulIdiotsPodcast.com. UseFulIdiotsPodcast.com is our website. Please go there to support the show, keep us going, and get bonus content. Thanks so much for watching Monday Morning. We really appreciate having you here. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.